What's good? What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Urban Platform Speaks. Make sure to like and subscribe as you come to the channel. I want to talk about a statement that George Lynch made about Allen Iverson, right? And the time that he played with Allen Iverson, the 76ers. George Lynch came from the University of North Carolina. I don't know who drafted him, but I know he played throughout his NBA career. He played with the Sixers. He played with Charlotte for a little while, and somewhere else I think George Lynch played. Oh, and he played in LA. He played for the Lakers too for a little while, right? And so George Lynch said at the time that, like his favorite player to play with was Allen Iverson. Right, and so one of the statements that he made about Allen Iverson, that he said that Allen Iverson was like was a cool person. He was somebody who he was so good. Allen Iverson was so good that he didn't really have to practice. And so I wanna play the statement that George Lynch said about Allen Iverson. And then I wanna give some my comments on what he said about Allen Iverson. So let me see. Hold up here. All right.
Kindness out of his heart, man. He was the difference between AI. Like I said, we got them tiers, and he's way up here, and then everybody else was down here. He didn't have to practice. Like, we had to practice because we had to know what the scheme was going to be, what we were doing, and all that. So Larry Brown was teaching, and he was stopped
every play.
And AI hated it. He was like, just let us play. Let's go. You can just play, but we can't just play.
How different was AI?
Man, I played 12 years, and he was the best teammate that I ever played with. Kindness out of his heart, man. He was the difference between AI. Like I said, we got them tiers, and he's way up here, and then everybody else was down here. He didn't have to practice. Like, we had to practice because we had to know what the scheme was going to be, what we were doing, and all that. So Larry Brown was teaching, and he was stopped
every play.
And AI hated it. He was like, just let us play. Let's go.
So look, now most people remember when Allen Iverson had like that meltdown at the I think there was at a press conference, and Allen Iverson had a meltdown about practice, right? Larry Brown was getting on Allen Iverson for I don't know if he missed practice or he didn't want to practice or something like that. But Allen Iverson kept saying, practice? Y'all getting on me about practice? We talking about practice? And Allen Iverson was such a great athlete that Allen Iverson didn't even play he played football and basketball. Allen Iverson always said that basketball was not even his number one sport. Football was, right? And so, I've seen clips of Allen Iverson playing football, and he was a beast. He was a beast. Michael Vick and another guy that played professional football, used to come from Virginia, played for the Saints. His name was Aaron something. I forgot the guy's name, but man, he said Allen Iverson in Virginia was that dude. Like when Michael Vick is singing your praises, you're a bad man. When Michael Vick is like, Allen Iverson was that dude. Another guy, Joe Smith, was out of Virginia, and Joe Smith went to the University of Maryland, right? And man, Joe Smith had, he said, when he got to play with Allen Iverson, like, in the neighborhood, pickup ball and stuff like that. Man, he said that, Allen Iverson again was that dude. But now what I want to say about Allen Iverson and practice. When I was younger and I heard Allen Iverson, I kind of identified with it. I was like, man, when you see Allen Iverson on the court, he hustling, he going 100 miles an hour on the court. He giving you everything he got during the game, right? So I was like, man, Larry Brown should be more understanding of Allen Iverson. And if he playing all out in the game like that, then, let them miss practice sometime, or let them, let them sit out, and that's because I was young and I didn't know no better, right? But when you think about people like Kobe Bryant, who stayed in the gym, Michael Jordan, who stayed in the gym and practiced and practiced out of their mind. And I thought later on as I got older, I was like, man, just imagine if Allen Iverson had been like more receptive to Larry Brown I know they bump heads a lot. If Allen Iverson had been more receptive to practicing the way Larry Brown wanted him to practice, and dedicating himself not just to the game, but trying to learn the game more than what he did. Just imagine how much better Allen Iverson would have been. I couldn't fathom like Allen Iverson being, I didn't know, I couldn't fathom. I was like, man, this guy giving you everything he got. But I think that if he could have had that trust if they could have had that trust between Allen Iverson and Larry Brown, just the kind of ball player Allen Iverson could have been. Like if he had to develop not just the physical part of the game, nobody, man, Allen Iverson, like I said, he was a beast. Physically, he was a beast. He was fast. He was fearless. I remember Tim Duncan said that there was nothing more scarier than to see Allen Iverson coming full speed, downhill against you, and you under the basket, and knowing that you can, and nothing you can do. I think Tim Duncan almost 7 feet tall, and you talking about Allen Iverson 6 foot 6'1", and he put that kind of fear. And Tim Duncan was a bad dude, Tim Duncan said, knowing that you can't do anything when Allen Iverson coming straight ahead, straight downhill, and ain't nothing you could do. That is just high praise coming from somebody like Tim Duncan, So, but if Allen Iverson could have and Larry Brown could have developed like that trust relationship, man, because they did make it to the championship that one time against the Lakers, but I just think that, believe it or not, I think that there was still room for improvement for Allen Iverson's game. And I think the relationship between Allen Iverson and Larry Brown was frustrating for Larry Brown because he knew what he had, in Allen Iverson as a player, and tried to get somebody like Allen Iverson to kind of conform, or not even conform, and to kind of like give you a little bit more mentally to the game than, like physically. Allen Iverson he was just a gifted athlete, man. And so that just would have been, what kind of career would Allen Iverson have had? They tried to even get Allen Iverson because he took so many, like going through the lanes, he took hits and got knocked down a lot. He tried to, to get Allen Iverson to lift weights, and he was opposed to that too, to lifting weights. He didn't want to lift weights. I just, looking back, man, I wish Allen Iverson had could have conformed a little bit more, had a little bit more trust in Larry Brown. I know, for a young guy, and when you look at Larry Brown and Allen Iverson, they come from two different worlds, two different perspectives, and they could never really, they would be on the same page for a little while here and there, but it was never consistent. Like, you never really got the feeling that, like, Allen, like most guards are an extension of the coach when they're on that floor. But you never really got the feeling that Allen Iverson was an extension of Larry Brown. That was more so Eric Snow, right? But I think if Allen Iverson and Larry, if he could have been on the same page and Allen Iverson was an extension of Larry Brown, that would have just made Allen Iverson, man. I don't, like the sky probably would be the limit as far as like what Allen Iverson could have done, with his career. So now, by the time Allen Iverson was traded, or he went to Denver, his physical game has started to like decline. And you could tell because Allen Iverson had a lot of miles on. He didn't have like a whole lot of nagging injuries, but he had lost a step, and his physical game had declined. But if Allen Iverson had developed his game to the point where it was like up here too, because just because you lose a step, that don't mean that your game should fall off. You know what I mean? That means that now, you're working smarter and not harder, and that never really occurred to me. Like when I was a younger guy, just watching Allen Iverson do his thing, I was like, man, Denver don't know how, why are the Denver Nuggets not really playing Allen Iverson, the way he played in Philly? But he got older, and by his game being, it was all physical, and he didn't develop like the mental aspect of the game, then that's what helped him that's what like really his fall off became even more apparent, and so that's I was like, oh, okay, now I see, but a lot of times athletes, and this happens to most athletes, right? Most athletes and that's in every sport, most athletes base their success on like the physical. They rely and it's so much easier for an athlete to just rely on the physical aspect of their game than it is the mental aspect of the game. And so if you have an athlete, for instance, who has an exceptional vertical leap, like somebody like Dominique Wilkins, right? Dominique Wilkins can jump out of the gym. That was his superpower, right? But Dominique really didn't have a low post game, and he didn't really have a mid-range game. His jumper was it was all right. He had like a little set shot jumper. It was okay. But once Dominique couldn't jump out the gym like that, that was his superpower. It was gone. Like if you played Dominique in his prime and you took his strength away from him, he didn't have anything else to go to. You just, you made him shoot hard shots and you boxed him out so he couldn't jump over you and get the rebound. That's how you stop Dominique. Whereas though Mike and Kobe, they did so much other stuff, like Mike had no weaknesses in his game. But most professional athletes, they don't develop, to the point like where Mike and Kobe did. Like learn like footwork. People take footwork. They take footwork for granted. But Mike and Kobe had excellent footwork. Mike, at the beginning of Mike's career, Mike was a slasher, right? He'll go to the basket, dunk on you, make some type of spectacular move, right? But as Mike got older, he developed that turnaround jumper. Kobe studied Mike and saw that, like that turnaround jumper, that's just almost as effective as the Kareem skyhook. Kobe 6'7", Mike 6'7", and they fading away, elevate a little bit. That's a hard shot to extremely hard shot to block when you got somebody 6'7", 6'8", and can fade away. And then if not only can they fade away and make that shot, but they'll give you, if you on them, you just so happen to play good defense, they can jump, head fake and jump off of the opposite foot or the wrong foot. and still score. So that's a move that's unstoppable, you know. And so, but most players in the league don't develop that type of move. So when they lose their superpower, whether it's their speed, whether it's their jumping ability, then their game really declined. And that wasn't the case with Mike and Kobe, right? But it was the case for Allen Iverson. And, you know, I learned that later on, you know, that Allen Iverson, his gift was his speed, his physical, you know what I mean? Allen Iverson, just his ball handling. If you go back and you look at Allen Iverson, the clips of Allen Iverson, he got people balling all over the place, or he'll give you a crossover, and next thing you know, he laying it up. You know, once he lost that step, you know, and he couldn't elevate like he used to when he was younger, then he didn't have any other moves to fall back on, whereas though it would have made him still be an effective ball player. And so, you know, I was like, you know, I thought about it and I was like, man, if Allen Iverson had to develop his game more, you know, like more of a mental aspect of the game, I think, you know, he could have had even more success than what he had, you know. And Allen Iverson had a lot of success. He never won a championship, but who knows, man, how far him and Larry Brown, you know, Allen Iverson, Larry Brown could have went had Allen Iverson bought into Larry Brown, you know. Man, that, you know, wow, it would have been crazy. But George, you know, listening to George Lynch talk about Allen Iverson, you know, being a cool dude and just being so physically gifted and blessed, whereas though he didn't even have to practice. Well, he thought he didn't have to practice, and the people around him thought he didn't have to practice. But like I said, if you got Mike practicing, who the best in the league, and you got Kobe who practicing, he the best in the league, you know, and they lived in the gym. Allen Iverson even spoke about how much Kobe practiced and he studied the game. Allen Iverson knew that, and you know, he watched Kobe do it. He spoke about how he admired the way Kobe did that, and it still, you know, it never occurred to Allen Iverson, but he wasn't interested in doing it. And I think when you're young, man, you think you know, Allen Iverson think that, you know, like those physical abilities was going to still be there, you know, for his entire career, but it wasn't like that, man. And so, yeah, I just wanted to add my 2 cents to what George Lynch said about Allen Iverson. Yeah, so that's it. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to leave a comment, man. Let me know what you think about Allen Iverson, man, and like his, you know, like his physical abilities as a basketball player. I think one of the best athletes, in my opinion, to ever play basketball. You know, and so, yeah, like I said, leave a comment. And with that being said, I will check you all out in the next video. Peace.